All right, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to another Ivinex webinar. My name is Brett Lund, and I'm going to be the host. And today we're going to be focusing on the Workflow Wizard, how to build workflows and different ways to use them. We've got a lot of stuff to cover on this one. It's probably the most requested topic. So we got a lot of things to learn, a lot of things to go over. So I'm just going to zip along here. As always, a couple quick notes. It's an interactive webinar. There's a chat icon on your Join Me widget there on your screen. You can open that and submit questions. I'm not sure how many I'm going to take on this since there's a lot to talk about, but I will be monitoring that chat. If I can answer your question, I will. And so the only audio that will be heard is my own, just to keep the noise down, and I am recording this. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so let's first talk about the Workflow Wizard. Why do we even want to use it? The Workflow Wizard is a tool for automating things. You can automate just about everything in Ivinex, and you can create as many different automated processes as you want. If you find yourself kind of doing repetitive tasks over and over again, you might want to consider automating that process. That's just one, that's one way to determine what you should automate. But really, it's up to you. It's your site, and you can kind of set it up to work the way that you want to. And I'm sure everybody could save time and save steps by utilizing the Workflow Wizard for automation. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the different workflow types. There's a few different ones, and it's important to understand how they work and what they do so that you can pick the right one for the job. So on the screen here, you'll see a list. We've got a timer workflow, and I'll just talk very briefly on what each one does. A timer workflow is kind of like it's something that just sits there, and based on what you choose, like what day of the week or a certain time of the day, the timer workflow looks to take action on those days or at that time, and based off its filter and everything, if it finds something to do, it's going to do it. So that's kind of the idea behind a timer. When a record is created, that's when you very first create a record in Ivinex. That would be a trigger to maybe do something else. When a record is updated, that's when something about your current record that's already been created, you change a field or fill in a blank or pick a different, check a checkbox and then save the record. That would be when a record is updated. You also have the choice to evaluate both as a trigger. When a record is created or updated, that could be a trigger. There's kind of those three choices, for creating and updating and created or updating. Another one is when two records are linked. In Ivinex, you have multiple data modules. A good example might be, maybe you have a contact module, and you set a task using the activity module while looking at the contact that you're setting up the task, call this person back or something like that. When that happens and you create the activity while looking at any record in the system, those two records, the activity record and the contact record, are linked together. So that can be a trigger of when to do some other automated process. You also have the reverse. Maybe when two records become unlinked, you're waiting for that. And then also we have a field type in Ivinex called a button. And you can create a workflow. When you click the button, it actually performs a workflow action or actions at that time. So those are some of the different triggers. or workflow types. Let's move on to the next thing here. All right. Yes, I've got some funny pictures on here, but one of the first things to note before creating some workflows is there's a few things to be aware of because it's a very powerful tool. And if you're not prepared or don't understand it very well, you can kind of mess up your site a little bit if you're not careful. So there's a few different gotchas to be aware of, and I'm going to go over each one and kind of explain how you can avoid it. The first one is infinite loop. An infinite loop is when let's say we've got a record and we make an update to it, and we've got a workflow that does something. And then maybe it creates a record in some other module. And when that record is created, maybe you have a workflow that then updates the original, first triggering record. Okay, so update record A creates record B, and when record B is created, it then updates record A, thereby creating another record B, and essentially an infinite loop of actions that trigger each other over and over again. That's not good. It can bring your site, to its knees if you have infinite loops running rampant. And so what's the best way to avoid an infinite loop? Map out a little bit, plan your workflows before, just diving in, kind of think about how the workflows might interact with each other. The other one is create a strong filter. All workflows have a filter that is the gatekeeper that keeps them from, performing the actions. So create a strong filter, a smart filter that is smart enough to keep the workflow to only, to make sure that it only does what it's supposed to do at exactly the right time when it's supposed to. Okay? Another thing that can be confusing sometimes is changed. The idea of something has changed with my record, so I need to trigger a workflow. Now, how Ivinex system works is, with how the workflows trigger, is they're serial processing, not really parallel processing. Okay? So let's say I've got 3 workflows all waiting for my record, something about it to change. If what'll happen is that the first workflow it encounters in order is the one that fires first. So essentially, if 3 of them are supposed to trigger off of one change, the first workflow, and I'll explain the firing order here in just a minute, but the first one that is encountered that evaluates to true will fire, and it'll do its job. And then what'll happen is it will save, the record will not be in a changed state. Initially, you've got, I made an update, so I'm in this state where the workflow should fire. So the workflow fires, finishes its job, and then the record is, stabilized after that. It's not in this changed state anymore. So now workflow number 2 was looking for that changed. But unfortunately, the record is stabilized, so the second workflow can no longer evaluate that record as I should fire. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Each workflow, when it completes, will stabilize your record, and it will no longer be in a state where the next workflow would have fired. So the way to get around that is specifically something changes in your record, you're always going to fire a certain workflow, and it's going to do its job. And then if you needed another one to fire, you would probably base it off of the change that the first workflow did. So essentially chaining the workflows. I manually do something with my record, my workflow does something automatically, then my second workflow is waiting for that first workflow to do its job, then it does its thing, and maybe a third or a fourth, I don't know how complicated you want it to be, but you can certainly do it that way. Okay, the firing order. I'm going to just talk about it briefly, and then I'm going to show you what I mean. But what fires first? It's actually visual in the workflow wizard. How you see them in order from top to bottom is the order in which they will fire. So you can use a naming convention to order them, numerically, alphanumerically, whatever you want to do. But they will fire in order that you see them. So top to bottom. Okay, and then one last thing to talk about here is browser state. What does that mean? This can be a gotcha. What happens is, since you're on the web, you're loading up Ivinex, and your browser loads what it needs to load to show you the site, and loads the record or records that you're looking at. And then it's done with its job. It's like, I've loaded what I need to load. You are currently in a state. Okay, your browser was aware of everything when it loaded it, but that's it. It knows nothing else unless you click on something. Then it goes and asks Ivinex for more information. Okay. So what that means to you is that I'm looking at a record, and I update something on my record, and I don't really refresh it. I just update it, and then a workflow fires, and maybe it modifies the record that I'm currently looking at. Well, my browser isn't going to know about that. My browser isn't going to know that there's some automated processes behind the scenes working, so it's not going to load anything new until I refresh the record. Okay? And the reason why this has a little asterisk by it is the next version of Ivinex will take care of this. Instead of update, some workflows fire, and I'll need to refresh my record. Instead, the fields that are updated, or field that is updated by workflows, will instantly change in your current browser window without reloading. So this browser state issue is going to be a non-issue in our next version. Okay. I didn't put it on here, but one thing I want to say about building workflows is test it as much as possible. And it might be wise to maybe have a couple test modules as an admin, where you can test different functionality before actually pushing it out into a production area of your site that everyone works with daily. That's a wise choice. Fine-tune your process maybe a little bit, and then push it out to everybody, and at least you've tested it and you know it's going to be okay. All right, so these are the simple gotchas. Let's move on. Okay, building a workflow. Let's talk about the pieces real fast. A workflow consists of the trigger, which we talked about earlier, which is when a record's created or something like that. And then it has a filter. So a record is created and the first name is Joe, or a record is created and its status is new. Something. We're trying to not just a record is created, although you can skip the filter. It's not required. Every time a record is created, if you didn't have a filter, would be when we moved directly to the action. But if you did have a filter, it's the thing that holds the action, holds it back. So record is created, the status is equal to new, which is the filter. Then what? Okay, we're either going to have, there's two kinds of different actions. You can have an action that is, itself. It's going to update itself in some way, or maybe, create some different records. But it can also, an action can affect related or linked records in some way. So if you pick that type of action, you will then have an additional filter that holds that one back or fine-tunes when it should go. Okay? So your traditional one is trigger, filter, action, and then what are the action items? But you can do trigger, filter, action on a related module. You have an additional filter. What are the action items? Okay, so we're just going to jump in now, and I think we're going to start looking at some workflows. log in here real fast. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Okay. Let me just go to the admin real quick. And we'll open the workflow wizard up. And I'm going to open up all of these demo ones. So we're going to be looking at them. That's a bunch of workflows. Okay. So we're going to come back here to the front end, and I'm going to say one thing. A workflow, let's just take a simple one, like when a record's created or when a record is updated. The context is important. What record was created? What record was updated? What module was that? Okay, and the reason why that's important is because it helps when you're trying to do more complicated workflows to understand that the trigger is a starting point and everything moves out from there. So if if I change this to doctor and click save and I've got a workflow that does something, my starting point has to deal with my contact record. Okay, so moving out from there, the context of it is I've got all of this information right here, the record that was updated. All this information is available to me because the workflow starts here. This is the trigger. I change this, something happens, so the information from this contact record is available to me to do something with my workflow. Like maybe I create an activity, I create a note, and I could say, what's the change? Their name was Mr. and now their salutation is Doctor, and I could create a note that actually has that content. Why? Because this was the trigger. This information was available to me. So context. All right, so let's just take a look at a couple of these. Let's do a really simple one. All right, here's a workflow. When a record is created, so doesn't exist, create a brand new one. No filter, so that means it's going to happen every single time. And what does it do? This one sets a field. Well, I'll go over all these little settings here in just a second, but the general idea of what does this one do? It sets a field that I've got called the import ID equal to the record ID or the collection ID of the record that was just created. So let's talk about that. We'll click on this record. It's a contact. We set that. In the admin here, I'm showing the record ID, which is 1. And what I want to do is, for some reason, every time a record is created, I want to grab that value and write it to here. Why? I don't know, but that's what I want to do. So it's every time a record's created. That way I always have this duplicated number right there. So let's talk about each piece of this. When you first create a workflow, you have to name it, give it a name you can remember what it does. The type, those are the triggers. You got all these choices. The group is just visual mostly. It's a way to group, your workflows into some kind of container like this that you can open and close. Your site may get pretty complicated. You might need to have a lot of groups. Maybe you only have a few workflows and it doesn't really affect you. So that's the group. This tab, this means what module, what am I going to base this whole workflow off of? When a record is created, where? A contact record. Okay, great. So this trigger applies to a new contact. Okay, great. The filter, of course, is like any other filter. And then the action, you would say new action, and give it a name, what it does. I named mine copy record ID because that's exactly what it does. So give yours a name so you can remember what it does. And then you've got a few different actions that it can do. It can update an existing record. And this is where you have a couple choices. The first one, triggering record, means that a record, like let's say the record was created and then it itself is the trigger, and I'm going to update the same record that was just created or updated. So it triggers an update or a change on it or some action off of itself, okay? So the original record that even started this whole process is the one that I'm looking to update. Update existing record, same one. That's what that means. And then you've got related. Related every module in your whole system. You could choose to update an existing related or activities or something, okay? What does that mean? That means here's my record, contact, and he's got a related accounts. Okay, there's 3 of them, and this one has 1. So when I pick related accounts as the thing I want to update, some kind of workflow based off this one would update that one account because it's linked to this contact. And the same workflow would update 3 accounts without a filter, of course, because 3 are linked to this contact. Okay, so that's what that choice means. As I said, when you pick related, you can add a new filter. I could get more specific. I could I'm looking to update related activities, and the filter now is based off of the fields in my activities module. So I could say, update existing record, all related activities, only if the activity is equal to email. And so that way it wouldn't update any notes or anything else. So additional filtering. Cancel that. And let's look at the actions again. Or whoops, I messed up. Let me go new. Okay, so then you've got create a new record. That's very straightforward. Some change over here or whatever the trigger was. I then want to create a new record. So I could just pick that. And then again, you're faced with the same choices. Where do I create this new record? I'll create a new account. Is there a filter on that? Maybe. And then what are my actions at that point? You know, you're just building it out. What does it do with the new record? What are the values? You know, those kind of things. Okay, so let's look at some of the other actions. Send an email. You can trigger the sending of an email, and that could include an email template, all sorts of things like that. What else? Link a record. So this is a good one. When I update a contact, or well, actually, I'm not sure how well that one is. I'll talk about another workflow in a minute to explain link record, but just know that one's available. I'll explain it more in depth here in a minute. And then based on, in Ivinex, we have some features that may include their own actions. They may enhance what you can pick, and they're predetermined actions that do specific things when we turn those features on. I've activated one called the zip code lookup feature, and so because it's active in this site, I now have a new kind of action, and I'll actually show you what that does. Okay? So that's very basic there. Let's look at this one real quick. We're good there. Okay, so let's see that one in action. Literally in action. Okay, so I'm going to create a new contact, and the workflow that should fire is it should grab this value, whatever it's going to be, the very next record ID, and it should write it to this field after my record has been created. So we're going to do that. Test 1. As you can see, all this is blank because nothing's been created yet. It's just temporary here until I click Save. So let's click Save. Here's test 1. The record ID was 61, and my workflow copied that value and wrote it to there. Now, as an admin, there is a permission that you can give yourself called the View Change History permission. And this is very helpful when trying to kind of see a few things about what's been going on with your record. Okay, so let's see if we can, see that workflow. All right, so I'm going to open it up. And what I see here is this blue represents, a workflow that effectively fired. And the workflow gives it the name. Copy record ID was the name of the workflow. And what was the action that did this change? That's the action because I gave it a name of that as well. And then what did it do? Well, the record was first created and my import ID field was blank. Okay? The record ID, of course, is automatically assigned as you create records. But my import ID was blank. And then the workflow fired, and that went from blank to 61. So if I had a bunch of different actions on there, you might see, a bigger list. First this was this, and then it was that, and then this field changed from this to that kind of thing. So that's a helpful tool to kind of see the history. So let's look at one of these other ones. Look at the change history there. And you can see a bunch of different things. Okay, so these white ones represent, manual things. People manually changed this to that and then saved it. The green ones represent when you are linking records, but the blue ones are the ones that we're concerned about because this is a workflow webinar. So blue represents workflows. Alrighty, let's see. Okay, I want to look at a specific workflow. I believe it's this one, new ticket. Okay, so let's look at the support ticket module here. Okay, so I've got a workflow for when a support ticket is created. I'm just going to show you an example of maybe a little field syntax working to automate something for me. So when I first create a support ticket, maybe I pick somebody, or maybe this is automatically done, I don't know, but I'm just going to say I pick somebody. Joe Tester is the guy who reported this problem. And in the Joe Tester record, there's an email address right here. Now, instead of manually going there and copying and pasting that into here because I want to use that email address here because I want to send emails, back and forth relating to my support ticket. I would, it's easier just to, I'm copying some information, but I'd rather have it here because it makes it easy to email out or even automatically email out from here. So I want the email address from that person, and I want it to be put right there. So let's look at the workflow that does this. Initially, a new ticket. When a record is created, create a new support ticket, and then I've got a filter on here. If my new date is equal to blank, that's when I want it to happen. So why, not important, but it's what holds it back. The first action is set my new date to the created date, which is a system field, always available to you. You can always call to it, and it uses a little bit of field syntax, and I'm going to pull up Microsoft Word or something here so I can, I'm not going to go too in-depth on field syntax, that's the next webinar, but I'll just kind of type out what it says. It looks like that. I'll make that a little larger. Okay, so what this means is give me the value of the created date field, and so then set my new date field to the value of the created date field. That's what it's doing. And this is the basic field syntax to do that. Now, another thing I could do is I'm setting the status, which is a drop down. Looks like this. I want to set one of those options. And I don't need to use any field syntax. I just say specific option, new. Okay? So this action does both of those things right then. Okay, so then the next one is I would like to get the email address of the contact that is listed on my support ticket. This uses a little bit different field syntax. It's using chaining syntax where I'm traveling through my contact field and getting the value of the email, and then I'm writing it to my email field. Okay, so You can read more about that on the training site or attend the next webinar. But it's multiple actions, multiple things are happening when that support ticket is created. So in the end, we'll just create a new one. New. And we'll say Frank. It's the guy. Test. Okay, hopefully that worked. I think it might have worked. It didn't work. It didn't work. I'm not sure why. I'll have to double check that one. But the idea is it's supposed to write that to there. I'm not sure why it didn't. It did the new date. I must have had something wrong in there. Oh, wait, I bet you it doesn't have an email. Great, I picked the only one without an email. Okay, let's do that one more time. We'll do Joe. I know he has an email. Okay. Come on. No? Anyway. Okay, so I'll troubleshoot that. But the idea is that it's supposed to get that. Let's move on. Okay, so I'm going to look at the opportunity workflows. I've created a bunch of them. And initially, I've got one that is when a record is created or updated. And then all the other ones are when a record is updated. And this one's very simple. It's actually only automating kind of one field at this point. So let's jump over here. Let's pick this one. The idea on this one is I've got a field here called sales stage. And it's in read-only mode, so I can't actually click it to do anything with it, but it has all of these options here. First and negotiation and one and that kind of thing. But instead of, saying, hey, we had a meeting on that day, and then I would like to change this to that option, I'm just going to have a workflow change this, and all I do is pick dates. Okay, so I'm going to not save that record. I'm going to pick maybe a little different one here, maybe this one. We'll say we had our second meeting today. And so now it says sales stage, first meeting, update that. Let's look at that again. Okay, so now it's second meeting. So let's look at the workflow on that one. It's very simple, very straightforward. So I've got one specifically here. And let's talk about this ordering. If all of these workflows are waiting for a change in the record, then maybe they all fire or are looking to fire, okay? So what I've done is I've created this naming scheme where I'm using, a series of numbers to order them in the exact order that I want them to be evaluated. So 0, 1, 0, 0 is before 0, 1, 0, 1. You can go this route if you want, or you could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kind of thing. Or A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That can work. The reason why I use this is because if you just use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, when you get to 10, 10 is going to be up here. So you're going to have 1, 10, 2, 3, 4. It'll order by the first number first and then the second number second. So that's why I do it like this. You can do it however you like. But let's look at that workflow. Second meeting. I'm looking for second meeting, the date to not be blank. And that because I checked it. I checked this field and saved my record. And then what does it do? It sets my sales stage to the option second meeting. And it does something a little different. It writes some kind of value out to a field, 0.3. I use that for something else, like what's my value, 0.3, when I've reached second meeting, and then it applies to a calculation here is all it does. But the idea is it's a very specific filter, just automating one field only. All right. Let's close that one. Now, one thing I want to do is let's look at this one, the very first one. And what's the difference on this one? Why did I pick created or updated for this first one, and all these other ones are updated? Because normally my process, or the process in here, would be to create it, but maybe somebody forgot something and they didn't mark it as a lead, or they didn't set the lead date. Like maybe they just said new opportunity, fill out some information, save, and they didn't say that this was a lead today. So I may need to trigger my workflow when it was created, and then when they click, lead as well. So created or updated. So that's why that logic's there. Lead not equal to blank, and that's the date. So initially, was it blank? Do something. Or not equal to blank? Do something. Or later on, did they update it? Okay, do something then, the same workflow. What does it do? Sets a specific date and sets the sales stage to lead. So pretty straightforward on that one. Okay, 2 records are linked. Let's look at that one. How do we want to do that? I'm going to look at this. I'm going to go to accounts. I'm going to pick this account. And first I'll just say what it does. And we'll just demonstrate it, and then I'll show you the workflow. So let's see. It's based off of contacts. I'm in the contacts. So the context is when I create an activity and it's linked to a contact, then do something. That's the idea behind it. Activity is related to a contact, then perform the action. So let's actually do that. Go to this contact. We're going to pick Mary Smith here. Okay, so Mary is related to one account, and that's the action when an activity is linked to a contact, then link that activity to my related account, and I just have one. Okay, so let's do link test 2, create a note while looking at a contact. Okay, link test 2. In theory, if I open up this account, this note should not only be linked to this contact, but it should also be linked to this account. So let's check that out. Scroll down here. Link test 2. So here's that link. Essentially, I rolled it up to the account level. That some people like that. Maybe I just want to go to an account and see what are all the appointments that have been going on, or what are all the notes that have been made for all the different contacts, or however you want to do that. All the different deals, opportunities, or something, and people are making notes, and I just want to go to the account level and see all of those notes. So let's look at the workflow for that. Okay, again, the context is important. What's the trigger? The trigger is I'm looking specifically for an activity to become linked to a contact. Now that's after the fact, okay? So just to explain that, logically when I create the note, it creates it. Then after the record is created, it links it to here, or whatever record I happen to be looking at. And once that's done, that's my trigger. So that's the order of operation. The record is created, saved. Our system automatically then links it to whatever record I was looking at, and then done. And then at that point, that's when the workflow goes, now it's time for me to do something. Okay, so that's the order of operation there. I'm waiting specifically for this. And I put a simple filter on there, only notes, nothing else. I don't want anything else to get past this, just notes only. So the action is, it's a very simple. The action is link record, and link record to where? Specifically, the accounts module. So any accounts that my contact is linked to, link to those in plain language. So let's do a demonstration to see if it works for multiple accounts. Okay, so we've got Mary, 1 account, Joe, 3 accounts. So let's do a note, link to 3 accounts. I'm going to click Save. There's my note. In theory, it should be linked to all 3 of these. So let's pick that. Scroll down. Okay, yes. Oops, click the same one. Let's pick this one. Yep. Okay, so well, you get the idea. It worked. So let's look at the filter on that. There isn't one, but we could add an additional logic in there, like if the account name was equal to something specific, that's the only related account that should get the note attached to it. It could be any piece of data from the account level. See if I could find something that might work. Oh, okay. Here's a good example. In my account module, I've got a field that says parent account. Now the idea here is that a hierarchy of companies. So if I click that, I could see that's the main company, and then this is a sub and a sub, and they all relate up to the main company. So I could actually use that logic. The idea is that only roll up this node activity at the contact level to an account that is a parent account. So the logic of that is, if this field's blank, meaning it doesn't have a parent, then it is the parent, okay? So I could probably add some logic like that. I could say if parent account, let's start over, link the record to the account where parent account is equal to none selected, essentially saying it doesn't have a parent, it is the parent. If I save that and then did that same note for that contact, the only account that it would link to would be the parent account. Let's see, which one is it? None of those. So none of these, I'm not actually linked to the parent account with this contact, so none of those would get the note, essentially. So, but that's the idea. Okay, so that's a good one. When 2 records are linked, it's a great trigger. You can do a lot of great things with that. Maybe I'm looking at a, let's see, we could be looking at an opportunity. And right here, I've got 2 fields. Hey, what account is this opportunity for? Well, this specific one. Maybe a different one is, this is a person opportunity and not a company opportunity. So when I set this field, the linked record field, it does kind of the same thing as creating a link between 2 records. So that could be a great time to trigger something. When I create an opportunity and it's linked to an account, or 2 records are linked, opportunity and account, then do something like send an email to me that there's a new deal in play, and maybe even include, the projected revenue, something like that. So that's really useful when 2 records are linked. And I'll say why again, is because you're waiting after the fact. An association between 2 records have been created, and now is the time to act. So it comes in handy a lot. Okay, so let's do when a button is clicked. What do we got? Okay, right over here. All right, so we've got a type when a button is pressed. And I'm going to demonstrate that one. First, let's look at, let's close that. I'll see if I can move this kind of off the screen a little bit. And let's look at where we're going to do this. Demo accounts right here. Okay, now I've got a bunch of address fields, this address, billing address, shipping address. And what I want to do is, all I really want to do is just put in a zip code and click a button and fill in, a few blanks, is what I want to do. Now, this feature specifically does that. That's what the zip code lookup feature does. And it references a lookup table. So I've got this module called zip codes, and it's got 42,000 records in it, every zip code possible. And so when I type in some zip code and click that button, I want it to look in here, find this information, and then write it back to my record. Okay, and it's going to be triggered off of a button click. So we'll do this. Look at that. And then I'm going to clear out and get the city and state. That's what I want for this one. So we'll update that, reload it. Okay, it's saved. Now, like I said earlier, where your browser has a state that you're in. Currently, my browser thinks that these are blank. So if I click that, or if I trigger a workflow and it writes something to these fields, based on my previous statement, you would think that the browser would not know about it. Well, currently, the button workflow type does more than just trigger the workflow. It also saves the record in whatever state that workflow, whatever it did, and then it refreshes the record. Okay, so coming soon, workflows will do the same thing as what the button does today. So let's do that. So zip code is this. Let's click a button, and just like that, you saw the change in real time. I didn't have to update this record. I didn't have to update this. I clicked the button, and its workflow did it all for me. It updated the record, simulated as if I did that. It triggered the workflow and refreshed these fields. Okay, so very handy. All right, so let's look at that workflow. Let's do that one more time. It's kind of fun. All right, saving that. Let's take a look. Yep. Boom. Just like that. So you can take advantage of the button workflow. It refreshes your fields right now. All right, so let's take a peek at the workflow there. Close a few of these. All right, so this is the workflow. And the trigger is when a button is pressed. And where am I looking for the button to be pressed? In my accounts module. And what's my filter? Well, it's a zip code lookup tool. So I'm hoping that the zip is not blank, otherwise I can't look up anything. So that's my filter. Zip is not blank. And then we go to the action part. And this looks a little bit different because it's part of the feature. It's what the feature is set up to do. But the name's the same. Action is specifically to the feature. Look up zip code. And then I do some mapping. Where do I find the zip code? Or actually, I already pre-did the mapping. Zip code goes to where? It goes to the zip field. City goes to where? It goes to this city field. State goes where? To that. So I'm actually telling it, after it looks up the data, where does it write the data? Right here at my account module. Okay, and so the special thing is that when you create a workflow, when a button is pressed, it appears as a choice for your button field type. So I'm going to click this, and you'll see, you've got the label and display type button, and then there's this thing called workflow. Now, every workflow that I've created that the trigger is when a button is pressed will show up in this select box. Nothing else. I can't go click a button and trigger a timer. Not going to happen. It's got to be when a button is pressed, trigger type workflow. Okay? So I've got 1, 2, 3. 3 of them. Those are the ones, well, it's probably already assigned to one of them. Count, look up zip. Yeah. So the workflows that I've set it up to be that type will be available to me here as a choice to pick from. Okay, so that's when a button is pressed. All right, so let's talk about the timer. I think that's the only one I haven't talked about yet. Trying to remember where I put that. No? Okay, right here. Let's talk about a timer. There may be a little bit of confusion around the timer. These settings right over here on the right-hand side are specific to when the timer should evaluate, when it should look to see if there's anything to do. Okay, it's not. That's its only purpose. So let's turn all this stuff off, except for Monday. So looking at this right now, it's going. Where is it looking to evaluate? It's looking toward the support ticket module, and then I'm sure I would set some kind of filter up. Right now, I'm just blocking this timer from running at all. Handy when you're developing. I'll show you how to do that. Pick something like record ID and then put it equal to something that's impossible, and that will stop this workflow from ever firing. I usually do that when I'm building something to make sure it doesn't inadvertently fire. Okay, so these selections over here are when should the timer look for something to do. Initially, you've got specific days of the week or specific days of the month. Like September, 25th. That's the day. On that day, that's the best day. That's when it should do all of this great stuff. Or a specific day of the week, Monday, every single Monday, at a certain time, 4 a.m., that's when it's going to wake up. The timer wakes up and says, let's look at these records. And it's going to try to find any record that can get past the filter. So, I don't know, let's add something on there. If the agent is equal to blank, okay, we'll just act like that one's not there. Every Monday at 4 in the morning, if this timer can find a support ticket where the agent is equal to blank, then we're going to do something. That's the time to do it. And then what are the actions? It's all the same as before. It can do anything. Could send an email, could change a field, could update the existing record, could link records, could do whatever you want it to do. I think just probably the most confusing part are these settings. These determine when the timer wakes up and is going to look for something to do. All right. Let's see where we at on this. Are there any? There may be questions. Are there any questions kind of about what I've talked about so far? Explaining what workflows do, maybe good reasons to use them. Are there any questions right now at this time? No? Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to move on to my next slide. It's very important. Ivinex is your software, and you're the designer, actually, unless we kind of built it for you. But most of the time, everyone has got an admin, and your administrator is, Ivinex gives you the tools to kind of modify your system, create whole new processes, automate things, and think of it as it's your software, that you can build and adjust whenever you want. So I would highly recommend that you kind of document how it works, not only to keep maybe yourself, straight on, 3 months later, what does this do? But anybody else who would maybe in your company need to understand how it works. You're building software, and you're probably going to increase the complexity or add new things to it over time. And just maybe document those things, and it'll help me or Ivinex when we're troubleshooting your system. and it'll probably help you to avoid any type of confusion. Or 6 months later, you add a workflow and it creates some infinite loop because you forgot, something was set up a certain way. It's just a good idea, is all I'm saying there. All right, not that one. How about this one? Trying to think if there's anything else I've missed about workflows. I guess the final thing I could say is, if you came to this webinar looking for something very specific, like I've got this kind of business, and I'm looking for a solution for this type of thing. It's very difficult for me to document something like that in a webinar because the workflow wizard can automate just about anything. So hopefully, just going over the concepts and how the tools work and maybe how you would want to use them helps give you some ideas for automating some different things that are very specific to you. Looks like we're coming up on about an hour. I actually made a little bit better time than I thought. If there are any questions at this point, I'd be happy to answer them, or even throw out a couple more demonstrations if anybody has any questions. No questions. Okay. Maybe I answered them all. All right. Well, I'm going to bring this to a close then. As always, we have our training site. You can learn a lot on there, more information about workflows. And specifically, the next webinar will be about syntax codes and equations, and workflows and syntax codes really go together. I wanted to do this one first, and then the next one is a way to extend the functionality of Ivinex in a way that can be simple to very complicated. So the next one will be syntax codes and equations, but you can learn more about workflows on the training site. Leave me a comment if you like. And let's see, anything else? That's it. I'm sure you've been in one of these webinars before, and you know that get on my email list if you're not on there already. And I post this information on our Facebook page as well. So I think that's about it, everybody. Thanks again for taking your time to attend this, and we'll see you next time.